Hi everyone, welcome to Youskilled Home, and we shooting our um, next podcast. We always try not to miss opportunity to meet bright people, and me and more we come up over Mr. Christian, and we will talk about cool stuff. Mr. Christian, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we will go forward.
Yeah. So my name is Christian Pankhurst. I am the founder of an embodied tribal healing work called Heart IQ, which is all about deepening presence and connection to ourselves through coming into deep safety. And from that place, forming relationships with others in a really healthy and attuned way. So I also do work with couples and families to help heal the wounds of the past so that people can keep their hearts open and navigate their relationship and lives with more joy.
Awesome. When you talk, I already have first question because me and Mo always debate about relationship, and we talk about what is the ratio between logic and heart, because you just mentioned heart, logic, and emotions. For example, in our relationship, how much we need to step out and think about this as a logical event to be together with a spouse, or there is nothing to do about the logic. It's all about heart, all about emotions. Could you please give us a little bit guidance about this?
Yeah. I don't use the word logics per se. It's more around consciousness and taking time to reflect and become aware of what's happening. So if I were to put it through my lens, I think it's really important to balance time where we are in that place of self-reflection and to also feel what's happening. And I believe that, some people call this the masculine and feminine energies, the masculine being more the intellectual, the capacity to think things through, to become conscious and aware. And the feminine is the life force, and it's the emotions. It's allowing ourselves to feel what's alive and to move with that, to feel the impulses. Um, I'm a big fan of integration. So it's not an either or question. If somebody is too intellectual and logical, they're not going to be felt. And people connect through the heart, and friendships are built and relationships are built through connection. And if somebody's only in their head, intellectualizing the world and being logical, they're not going to be met. They're not going to have the relationships that they crave. But if you are only in your emotion and you're disconnected from logic, from your mind, from your intellect, from your consciousness, you're going to be in a lot of drama. You're going to be run by your emotions. You're going to be hijacked in your life and in your relationships by personal wounding from your past, by triggers in the present. And you're going to be literally like a puppet on the string, potentially. So consciousness needs to connect with the emotionality. The heart and the mind need to come together into a body-mind connection. And only when that's integrated do we have the chance really to have a joyful life.
Well, I guess then the counterintuitive question is how do you integrate these two pieces, the heart and the mind? Because oftentimes, at least from some of the experiences I've been going through, is that if you are in a situation that you have to take a decision at some point, sure, there's the intuition that you can tap into. You kind of step aside and have a little bit of time to kind of ask yourself whether it's a hell yes and all that things. But in the real world, sometimes when you're put in situations and you have to take that radical decision making at that specific point, sometimes, at least from the experience I've gone through, that you don't have really that much of a choice other than just like see the logical part. So spreading a little bit of, or shedding a light on how do you integrate these two pieces, but also in situations where you have to act upon a certain situation at the spot.
Yeah, get it. I can think of many ways or situations where life is going to call and command an instant choice. It's not going to have time to think and get logical. And likewise, the opposite is true. But for me, the way I integrate different aspects of myself, whether it's logic, emotion, the heart, parts of me. Because I don't know if you can relate to this, but as I feel and become conscious of myself, I realize that there are parts of me that are young, parts of me that are more, like I said, masculine, more feminine. So I have inside of me a whole collection of different parts. And the way I integrate all of this is through a practice of, be best described as unconditional acceptance. So it's letting myself have space for all of it and to not judge it. So we're very good at critically imposing these judgments onto ourselves, like we're not okay as we are, it's not enough, not good enough, we're not doing enough, this part isn't welcome, it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to express this thought. You know, our mind is so filled with conditioning, and this creates separation. So it's often the judgments we have about ourselves that create the disconnect between these parts. So through self-love, through self-acceptance, we get to naturally become more whole. But integration isn't something we do, it's the outcome of loving what is. So it's not like we can say, I'm going to combine my mind and my head today through this 3-step process. That's the head talking. The connection of mind and heart occurs naturally. That's our natural state. So the only reason we would be separated from head and heart is because something has happened in our life where we haven't felt safe to feel our emotions. And so we're now in defense. And therefore, it reveals a split. The mind-heart relationship is not naturally split. That is a function of being in a culture and in a life filled with trauma. That makes sense? Yeah.
Cool.
No, it just reminded me of the conversation that I had with you, Greg, about how sometimes we are also trapped in our minds and always having certain judgments about everything that runs in our life, right? And so it just spiked me, or like gave me a sort of a pause when you mentioned the word judgment, because, well, I feel like the question is this how the mind is wired, to be always associating judgment to it? That this is a question, or like I see it something normal. Like in order for me to understand the world, like that's the first thing that the mind kind of captures. Oh, does he speak Arabic? Does he not speak? Oh, he doesn't speak English. But that's actually a judgment. It's for me to understand how to interact with the other. So like for me, what I was trying to get into the direction of the conversation is, for you, Greg, when you look into judgment, do you see it and then try to cope with it, or is it just something that you came with an acceptance? Because he mentioned the part acceptance. How do you deal with these judgments when they come to you? Because that's something I'm also facing, and I'm curious to know from you, how do you deal with these situations?
I like what Mr. Christian said about judgment. I think one of the basement about this, it's not being safe. So you set up a judgment as a type of filter, you know. So initially you're trying to protect yourself from a worst case scenario and everything. So you start to label and judge, as you say, like, okay, the person comes, whether he talks Arabic, whether he's having good intentions towards me and everything. In order to, so if you set up like multiple layers, I think in your mind you feel the most safe. So he will not come directly to your core. I think so. So that's why the mind creating multiple doors, you know, to really get into your heart. This is what happening while I'm thinking about the answer. And when Mr. Christian was talking about relationship, and also I'm thinking what you were saying, combination heart and the mind. It's not always possible because the circumstances is not allowing us to make this connection. Sometimes we really need, okay, if everything perfect, if you fix everything in external life, okay, no problem. Combine this and you flow in. But so often we're in such constraints that it's not the time to combine it, or we just need to think logically, or not the time to open the heart, something like that. I always face such periods that I cannot put them together. It's not the time. I need to, maybe one day I'll fix everything, I will flatten everything, then I'll combine. But now I need to be different. But I know it's something I still can combine and still can go through. Could you please clarify on that, Mr. President?
Interesting. I agree with what's been shared, that the mind naturally is making snap judgments in every single moment based on everything that's in our perception in order to orientate life. But I think there's a difference between judgment and prejudgment, which is prejudice, right? It's the prior assumption that something is so based on the past. That is something we have to be careful of, because if I've had a bad experience with my father, and now I see a man that looks like my father, I will prejudice him that he's going to act a certain way with me, and I'm going to project that he's dangerous, that it's not safe to open to this person. So our natural prejudices are the judgments we make in the now based on information from the past. That's something that we need to be wary of. And they're usually emotionally charged, they're together. When it comes to the time when and when not to open the heart, it all depends on what it means to open the heart. Like I know that your listeners are aware of this, that we're not talking about literally the physical heart here. But when I talk about the work that we do to open the heart, what it basically means is to is to do the work so that we become fully alive and present in the here and now, and that we're willing to feel right here and now what is here and now. That's it. So an open heart doesn't mean emotions. It doesn't mean love. It means we're willing to open to what we are with here and now. Most people don't want to open their heart, because if they open their heart, they will have to feel what's here and now. And what's here and now is unexpressed grief, rage, their past wounds, their inner children, their relational dysfunction, everything that's in their life where they have used distraction as a means to avoid their deepest purpose. They're going to meet their addictions. They're going to meet all the pain that is being covered. So we naturally close our hearts. Right now, the three of us, we do not have our hearts open. We cannot in this moment fully. That would requires a whole different environment, a different culture. So the idea that we're even walking around with open hearts is a misnomer. Because if our hearts were really open right now, we'd be in tears, in bliss. We would be blessed. We would be in our pain. We would be in our excruciating divine connection with God, on our knees, surrendered in our deepest connection with ourselves. So, we're carrying ourselves with a certain amount of persona, identity, looking good for the camera, trying to think of what to say next. We're in our heads trying to figure shit out while we're doing our best, to be relaxed and present with one another. But we're at the tip of the iceberg of what it means to truly be open. There's a whole nother level. So, but I don't try to become more open in my life. I'm just watching and ask myself the question, am I safe right now? And how do I make this animal body feel more safe so that it naturally opens? So the heart opens when we feel safe. So then the question in life is not, am I in my heart or not? Is, do I feel safe? Is my nervous system regulated? Am I anxious? Am I jittery? Am I in my head worrying about things? Or can I just be here as me in the presence of you?
Beautiful. Yeah. The thing is with the mind is like, it's a non-stop inner voice that keeps chattering, that never stops.
Indeed.
I don't know about you, but that's what happens with me.
Yeah. Just
and
like me.
and the thing is like, sure, if the right question to ask is, am I feeling safe? The next question that comes to me is actually feeling safe is something that you can feel all the time, or is just it's part of life, is to also encounter and feel these different polarities in different stages in life. And so sure, I feel like the question of feeling safe has to be there, but then how do we deal when we with the situations when we're not feeling safe?
Yeah, no, it's great. That's really good. So again, words are so sneaky, like they have double meanings and associations based on culture and how we navigate language. So one level of safety is we're walking down the street and our life is suddenly under threat, or somebody that we love is under threat. We get ambushed. A gang comes up with a knife and they're threatening with our lives. It is absolutely natural to feel unsafe, terror, fear, and to do whatever we need to do to get out. We're not supposed to have our hearts open. We just need to like take care of ourselves and survive. The type of safety that I'm talking about is not protecting ourselves from being triggered or being overly cautious in life. By safety, I'm talking about feeling your how do I put this? It's feeling yourself enough that you can be with. So I'm going to sound repetitive here. It's like, can all of you come along for the ride? Or in this moment, do you have to leave parts of you behind in order to be acceptable? So when I hear the words like, okay, it's not realistic potentially to feel safe all the time, I get that. We're not talking about major safe and unsafety in terms of events that are happening in our life. The question that I'm asking is more about, are we aware of the background tension that most of us have that we're not aware of, that is a subtle form of defense that is almost imperceptible in daily life because it's become so normal? So what I mean by that is, if you imagine a TV, have you ever had it? I don't know if you, modern TVs don't really do this anymore. I suddenly revealed my age. But there's often sometimes background static. You see the white noise.
Yeah,
right?
we're old enough.
Yeah, you're old enough to know about that. My son was running like, oh God. Children today don't have white noise. So this white noise, if you look at it for long enough, it disappears. It's no longer white noise. And that sound, that if you hear it long enough, your nervous system tunes it out. And you just think that there is just white and it's just normal. And what I'm saying is that many of us walk through life with this conditioned white noise in our nervous system. So there's this subtle vibration of tension in our system. And it's so subtle that we have concluded that it's normal. But this tension impacts our quality of life. And it's a measure of unsafety at the nervous system level, which basically means unsafety means unregulated. Unregulated simply means that your nervous system is slightly hyper or hypo aroused, which means you aren't in a parasympathetic response. You are now in a sympathetic, adrenalized, slightly overstimulated response. And that's what I'm talking about when I say safety. It's not a measure of are you physically or emotionally safe in the world in relationship to others. It's, is your nervous system in what would be called a sympathetic dominant or parasympathetic dominant state? Because if you're in a sympathetic dominant state, you're going to be slightly in alert, slightly in defense, more in your head. Your body isn't going to heal. You're not going to rest. You're not going to sleep. You're going to be filled with anxiety and worry. You're more likely to trigger into depression. You're more likely to be snappy and closed with your partner. This is making sense.
So much.
So my work is all about bringing people out of sympathetic dominance into parasympathetic dominance and have that be a way of life. Knowing that when that person comes to threaten your life, it's normal to go into sympathetic because you want to defend yourself. That's a good time to get into, all of survival mode. Absolutely.
So cool. When you talk about this, in my head there is analogy. I know in fitness, you also, as I understand, was related or maybe still related to industry. So in rehabilitation, sometimes you completely cure the injury completely, but the nervous system still had a glitch. So it's you feel pain. There is no mechanical damage anymore in the particular joint or muscle, but the nervous system sends the signal that pain is there. So what you said, I see the analogy. Wow, probably as you said, with trauma and everything, there is still those glitch, and the nervous system sending. It's fine, you healed, but cool if we will make different pattern or different pathway, so we can figure out life.
Indeed. I'll take that one step further that might or might not land. I don't know. This, I have experienced for the last 30 years a lot of chronic pain. So physical pain, hips, shoulders, hands, neck. Now, on X-ray, there is a ton of damage. Arthritis, joint impingement, degenerative joint disease. So it's very easy for the brain to associate the image of damage with, that's the reason I have pain. But I know that I can go into an altered state and all the pain disappears. And in fact, none of these areas are intrinsically painful anymore. The wound was healed decades ago. The body is very intelligent. It does what it needs to do. It's not normal to have chronic pain. What I realized was that my physical pain is my body expressing what was too much emotionally to feel. In other words, as soon as I allow myself to feel what is in fact under the pain disappears. So I would say it's not just about the pattern of the neurological firing, the glitch of the nervous system. What if the nervous system doesn't glitch? What if it's perfectly imperfect in that our pain is often emotionally loaded, and that if we can't feel ourselves, there's only one way the body can tell us, and that is through physical pain, because that's the one thing we will feel. But what if our physical pain is sometimes, not all the time, because sometimes there's actually real injury. Of course, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about the chronic decades and the things that move and the types of complaints where people have ME, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. It's these unending burnout symptoms. There's often a ton of emotional, unconnected energy. And when the nervous system cannot connect to the energy, it will create pain in the body as a consequence. Is this making sense?
So it's stored somewhere, for example. Like, as you say, it's not connected to the flow, it's getting stored like the trash.
It's stored because the body mind can't identify the original source anymore. It's disconnected, and thus it's held in the body. It's not integrated anymore. And that's why the personal healing work, our personal development journey, our willingness to connect to all of our parts, to connect to our dark side, to connect to our shadows, to connect to these wounds that we carry, and to feel them fully so we can start to reintegrate this emotional energy that's been stored as tension and is expressed as physical pain, to let that melt and digest.
Yeah. And with this whole thing of like parasympathetic and sympathetic, there's different ways of addressing it, right? Like there's the physical part where you know you have I don't know, certain modalities where people use, for example, ice bath, you know, to tap into that. But when it comes to, I feel the association to bringing the topic that we talked about, the integration of opening the heart and having also the intellectual mind. Is there any way that we can actually think of it or also feel into it to reach to, because when I think about it, what comes to me is stillness. Like, how do I come back to that stillness in order for me to reach to that sympathetic or parasympathetic system? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. There's the physical interventions that are profound and important. I would say, if I could summarize one aspect of intervention, which is more of a way of life, it would be slowing down. So becoming aware of how fast we think, move, respond, how fast we eat. So slowing down as a philosophy is critical. Breathing, meditation, connection with others. That's called co-regulation. When you bring another nervous system into connection with yours and your bodies synchronize, right? Beautiful, healthy, we're not meant to be isolated and on our own. We might need a lot of alone time, but we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be connected. So connection is key for a healthy nervous system. Mouth breathing, for example, activates the sympathetic. So consciously breathing through the nose would be a parasympathetic exercise. So all of the things you've just shared, and there's hundreds more, that would be, it's a way of life. But here's the thing. We can't biohack from our mind a state of no mind. Right?
One more time, please. I'm trying to understand.
We can't just come up in our mind and go, what's the strategy to take me out of my head so that I could now be in a more parasympathetic space? That is a mind loop that will only further this idea that there's something you need to do to relax. And that's part of the virus inside of our consciousness, is this, and that got installed very, very early. So most of us grew up as babies with a lot of conditionality to the relationship, to love, to belonging, to feeling welcome. In other words, we were not unconditionally welcomed as who we are in every moment. There was usually probably things that we needed to do to behave in order to get validation and to get love. So we've got this built-in idea that if I do right, I will be loved, right? When I do this, then I can relax and rest. When I do this, then. So this idea is what creates the tension and the disconnect. So the way forward is not a technique or a modality. It's to rest in being. It's to let go of this need to do as a means to achieve anything. Even the state of rest is not an achievement. It's a surrender of achievement. It's a dropping in rather than a going forward. Is this landing?
Yeah, I think this is our communication yesterday. When you say when the mind is pushing so hard, how to remember? Yes, we was discussing the ratio mind and heart. So at certain time, you were saying like at certain time it's open conversation. We was guessing. We was just guessing. At certain time, I need to scale down, link it with the heart, and just follow with this because the mind it's making lots of traps.
Yes.
Um, Even though I was searching, reading some article, don't remember where, and I liked the. I think we was talking with Mo also something called racing mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's myself also being captured by that. Like for example, you sit in the empty room, dark room, and if you just start to let your mind race, you like, wow, I want to switch on light. I want to distract myself because the mind is keep racing, and it's not always healthy racing or it seems like wow, I need to calm down this engine, I don't know, or distract. But at least I'm trying to understand how it's racing or anything. I'm sure many people just escaping from that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't have an off switch to their mind for sure.
Yeah. The thing is, like, if we think about it, the mind processes around 70,000 thoughts a day. And if you look at this number, and the metaphor that comes to me is that if you're actually speeding in a car with a certain high speed the whole time, well, the car is eventually going to crash.
Yes.
And I was having a conversation with a friend the other days about how do we actually treat the mind as just any other organ in the body. Like in a way, we're giving so much power to the mind when we start being in our head. And he raised that point, and I was like, yeah, but the mind is what makes us kind of think and become intellectual, and so there's also part of me was wanting to kind of stay attached to be in my head in a way. It's like, how could I really treat the mind as any other organ if it's actually the main steering wheel for me to cross-check and validate and make sure that I'm going the right direction, etc. And I feel that's the whole understanding for me of how to navigate. And yeah, maybe treat the mind as a friend.
Yes.
And not to just like always, because I fall sometimes in the patterns of the self-sabotage because the mind keeps saying things, oh, that's something from a past history. So it's about fine-tuning.
Yes.
Being friends with the mind, does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, it's like having a mind as an ally. Anything we make wrong creates resistance. And whatever you resist persists. It becomes stronger the more we, make it into something like the enemy. So how to befriend it, use it. It's a beautiful tool. It's not so much the mind, a lot of people saying, well, I need to go from my head to my heart. But then they leave the mind behind as if like it's better to be in the heart. No, it's not better. It's just important to have access to all of it. I think there's a quote that says, the mind is a terrible master, but a wonderful slave. And therefore, it requires direction. The mind needs to be guided by something beyond the mind, which is the spirit, the consciousness. There's something else that's driving the bus. It cannot be your racing, spinning mind that's going 100 miles an hour that can't be stopped. If that's what's running the show, then, well, unhappiness is the result. In a very simple.
Yeah, it's interesting about what you say, self-sabotage, because I'm a little bit linking this with fitness or training, and I found out every time I got my personal injury, my mind was saying, I will get something. And I was getting like strains, whatever I was falling. And at the same time, I was doing maybe more risky things, but I was like, no, I'm cool, I'm fine. I never get anything. So before I was reading, there is term I think called martyrdom. There is libido, martyrdom. Like libido is more creative force, martyrdom it's self-destruction or self-destruction force. And many times my mind was like wanted to. I was back in university, especially like 10 years ago. My mind wanted to distract itself. Like especially those time I was affected by Fight Club. Remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Czech Palahniuk Fight Club and with Brad Pitt, and like the self-destruction is the only way to enlighten, to be enlightened. And those time I was like, my mind was very good machine to distract myself until I was practicing nihilism. Those time I was not treating anyone as any authority. But I found out that this practice made me completely empty. I was not able to reconnect with myself, and it's taken me around a year to like forget those practices and just start to move. But I found out the mind can be greatest self-killer.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I guess being friends with the mind is a good way of looking at it. I want to tap back into the topic of the connection and how we as human beings are actually meant to be social creatures. And yes, sometimes we might require to have some time alone. And this time alone, I don't know, the views of what you see is an advocate or like a reasonable time to be alone, but it's actually subjective to each individual. But like the time alone is also important to kind of fuel the inner kind of soul and inner spirit with whatever you need into practicing meditation and stillness. But when we also think about how we are social creatures, there's also certain ways of understanding how not to be always in that space of bringing whoever in our field, because that could be also an absorption of our own energy. So the balance of having that ability to be social creatures, but also being cautious of who to step into your own circle.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to highlight on that?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I say, for example, I need a lot of alone time, it's because I've got very bad boundaries and I tend to put others' needs first, and I feel the field of others more than me. So I need time alone in order to become self-sovereign and to feel my agency and to feel my feelings. What do I want? What is my yes? What is my no? Some people are far healthier and may need a lot less. So I totally agree that that's subjective around how much time we need. But the only reason I need alone time is to connect to me so that I'm not merging with other. And also, am I capable of spending time alone, or am I codependent with my loved ones where my value is dependent on my relationship going well, having kids, that somehow the very relational world becomes a distraction from my pain? So there's a question to be asked here is, what are you doing with your pain? And a lot of people, they go into relationships. That's what they do with their pain. That's their way of feeling less hurt, is to be in connections. For some people, they stay away from relationships. They stay out of connection, and they stay in a hyper independent, alone state to avoid their pain. So let's assume your question's asking if somebody's in a healthy self-connection and they're not avoiding or going into relationship to avoid pain, where are the social norms? What's healthy? For me, for example, one way of describing that is friendship, vulnerability, for men to be sharing time with men and women with women. These are all critical elements of our social fabric. Although I'm not an expert in this field, my awareness is that before 10, 12,000 years ago, in what would be considered the modern civilizational age, we lived more and more in pod-based villages of up to, say, 100 in more tribal settings. where it was very normal for example, a hunter to go out, have an experience that was super scary, like being attacked by a lion or a tiger. They manage to escape. They come back into the tribe, and they're filled with fear. They would never think to process that on their own. They would do what we call tribal regulation, which is they would dance together, scream together, shout around the fire together. They may lie together. They would do things to support the collective tribal nervous system. And I think when I hear it's the social, that we're social creatures, I think it goes beyond that. I think we are part of a tribal nervous system. I believe that if we were living, breathing, connecting, eating, sharing for a period of time, we would sync up. Our nervous system would begin to become as one. And hurting you would feel like hurting me. And it would be like, it's beyond family. It's tribe. You're my people. And I think that's what's normal. And I think we're so disconnected from community, from tribe, that we're suffering with all this mental illness and all these health issues. And we're trying to identify the cause. And I think a big part of it is that we've lost this sense of interconnectedness, this togetherness, this sense of we're home with others. And we become socially isolated. Even if we live in cities like this, where there's more than millions of people living close together, but we've never felt more alone. Why is that? Why is it that the numbers of people doesn't seem to matter? It's the quality of connection that really matters. So I think that, we're tribal creatures, we're social creatures. But that doesn't mean that we're not sovereign. I just believe our culture is so very, very sick in that it's lost this part. I think where it comes in really powerfully, have you heard of the term, it takes a village to raise a child, right? That we've developed this idea of a nuclear family. Man, woman get together, get married, they live in a house. The houses are compartmentalized. It has walls separating from other houses. So they're basically on their own. They're doing it together. Some people are just doing it on their own, single mum, single dad. But let's just assume that the relationship is still together enough to create a unit. It's just two. And then they produce a third, the child. These individuals, these adults, are in deep need. To raise a child takes a lot of work. If you don't have help, support, where are they getting their needs met? How do they deal with the overwhelm, the lack of sleep, the pressures of having a career, needing the money, needing the job, needing to do the house, needing to clean, needing to keep everything and all the stuff together? It's a lot. And a nuclear model is actually not designed well to support a child's development, because the child needs parents that are relaxed, at rest, available, attuned to be able to feel the needs before those needs turn into distress. And if the parents are all in their head and into their anxiety and worry of how things are going to happen, and then the relationship breaks down, divorce rates are through the roof, that child is literally now in an environment of disconnect, separation, anxiety. And before the age of 8, a child cannot self-regulate. Their nervous system is incapable of it. So they rely on the parent's nervous system to calm, to bring their system into parasympathetic. So if the parents are wired like this, with a racing mind that doesn't turn off, the child will inherit it by osmosis, by being in that absorbing space. That's why a nuclear family model is dysfunctional at the core. What's needed is a completely revolutionary upgrade to how we construct our social fabric, which starts to install the idea that our elderly, our grandparents, should not be put away into old people's homes and made to live a life of quiet desperation where they have no more meaning. Elders need to be brought in. They have wisdom. They have had experience in caring for children. They need to be part of the family. Now, in some cultures, this still happens. Grandparents are still very much a part of the family. But it's not enough. It's still very much the family rather than the tribe. Tribal love is where you can trust your child with a village and that you're not raising that child alone. Every child has 50 fathers, 50 mothers, an experience where there is a sense of belonging to something larger than just mum and dad, and where mum and dad have brothers and sisters and a larger village to hold them. And this distributed version of holding family is not new. We've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. It's just forgotten because in the last 10,000 years, we've moved from that model into cities and into modern civilization, which has its perks, but it's at a cost. We've paid a price for that.
Yeah, I have I want to connect all of this. I want to connect the brain and heart, what we discuss, and community, and raising it and child together, something like that. So, for example, based on our experience, we here still brand new as a facility, and we're trying to build community. So one of the analogy, what you were saying, when somebody run after a lion, he full of stress, and the tribe somehow trying to distress him. So one of the prerequisite of this, obviously, everyone in the tribe is interested in the other person's success. So building connection, community here, I found out that okay, we're about to build a community, but does really all the people want success of mine, or I mean success of tribe? I didn't find this, so that's why I was like, wow, so many, like I see people coming. I'm like, okay, we can build this. These people genuinely want me. I'm not saying about me. Us to grow, us to succeed. It's great to us, but so many people come here to benchmark, to I don't know, just
Assess.
to assess, to use. I would say to use us, and I was like to bring them into tribe. Don't feel like so. It means I'm already closing the heart, and I found out that my heart always keep closing because those tribe which would be great to make, you need to bring only those people who will be happy to assist. And like even though we have now 1 month's baby, and I'm thinking like, okay, you'll bring it, and does everyone needs to see the baby? For example, I was thinking.
No,
Exactly.
no. It's a really good point. Like, it's quite controversial, the topic around inclusivity. Like, do we say yes to everyone because that's the spiritual, open-hearted thing to do? And yet, that's not how tribes were built in our distant past. Plus, we've forgotten what it's like to be a contributor. I really agree with what you said. There are people that are so disconnected from the social fabric of giving and receiving and mutuality that they're now so independent. They come into a place like this and they're seeing what can they get. They want to take, they want to use because you have a service, and they're conditioned to see it that way. I get it. You're not going to want to build tribe around those people because they're not contributors. They're not bringing something to the table. They're not wanting success for you. That needs to happen, but therefore it's okay to say no to people. In that this idea that we need to say yes and include everybody who wants to be, for example, in tribe or in a community. Communities are usually built around resonance, meaning we like and appreciate and value the same things. So maybe it's a spiritual practice, maybe it's a gym, maybe it's a philosophy. So we start to bring people together that are like us. And life naturally organizes around resonance. And people that are not resonant won't be attracted, or they won't be sustainable in that. They'll find it will get pushed out. This is just natural, normal ways of being. And there is no such thing as a community that fits everybody, and now everybody has access to your child because that's the right thing to do to be inclusive, even though they're damaged or maybe not in a place where they're going to serve that child. In fact, in tribes in Africa, they're so protective of pregnant mothers that even members of their own tribe, if they're angry or upset, they won't be allowed near a pregnant woman. Because just because you're part of the tribe doesn't mean you have access by right. You still have to do your work. You still have to come with a clean, open heart. So if you're aggressive, you've got a lot of fear, you've got a lot of anger, they don't let you near that mother. You know what I mean?
Cool.
So I think it's very important that if you're holding a space for community to enter a place like this, that you become a custodian, a gatekeeper to the right people that you want to invite. Because some people will come in and they will not have your good vision to their heart. And they may not do it intentionally, but they become like a vampire. They may suck and drain energy out of the organism, and they won't add to it. Therefore, there needs to be a healthy immune system, a boundary to what are you saying yes to, which means you need to be very clear about what is this place, who is it for, who's the right fit frequency-wise, and then having that invitation very clear, and then having the autonomy, the right to say no if that doesn't fit. Then you create a solid start. Make sense?
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from this is two main things. Is first the common grounds that people are attracted to is that how do we meet them in the certain frequency that we're trying to put here. I mean, I know that here you have certain values, you have certain aspirations of where you want to head. And that's actually part of the frequencies that people are coming back here to actually feel into it. But then there's another layer to it is, okay, we have a common grounds, we're matching frequencies, but what is the contribution to this whole thing that you want to build together? And I feel that's a very important piece. Yeah.
Yeah, and another very important part, what you said, everybody did work on themselves before coming, and we found out that so many people come and throw on you. I think you as a coach experience this a lot. So like people happy throw for you the tons of garbage, right?
Yeah.
And
Projection.
Yes, projection. Yeah.
without being professional, if you take it, you probably need to sit and recover right after, I think.
Yeah. I've been physically sick from the decades of projection, and I didn't do good enough self-care to have good boundaries and to say no to that. It's really important. And you're going to get a lot of projection because as the owner here, they're going to project the leader on a more subtle level, maybe even farther at some points, like a whole different types of energy. And then what comes along with that is the emotional baggage of all of the unhealed relationship with authority, leadership, being together in groups with others. And, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. But I like what you're doing here. I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you. But I realized that establish the right communication and the way, having your vision, but not being a jerk at the same time.
Totally.
It's very important to, but it's also a virtue, how to make it in a socially approved way, to stay somehow we are not open to everyone, and you need to how to say, because sometimes what I always felt when I'm feeling that it's not my people, I always separate. So now we separated, good, and now we filter the people out. But sometimes so many people take it as a socially unacceptable, how come, why are you separating from us, why you're not part of us? And I'm still searching the way how to like announce it in the way that not hurtful for others, but at the same time I need to move my own way.
Of course.
So,
We have this Arabic proverb that says, trying to translate it, that pleasing all people is impossible, right? And so in this whole journey of life, I feel like, at least from the way that I understand it, is that we're here to magnetize people who are in a way like us, vibing in the same frequency, because if not, it becomes like a hustle, being able to explain yourself or trying to put another layer of another mask that you're not. And why? Like, you just want to be you, and you just want to live life with your authentic version. And I feel that's part of it, you know?
yeah. And we close to wrap up our podcast. I just want from Mr. Christian one practical advice for, especially now, what you said when at certain time when you didn't develop the trash remover from you, and you was collecting and you was sick. How to quickly, for example, you met the person who drained you out, but you cannot
Give it back to them.
for example, sit and recover. But you have another person, and you need to give them positive energy. How quickly to recover on the way? How quickly to reconnect and remove this and give to another person good energy?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there is a quick and easy tip, but for me, it's about designing a life where I build in enough restoration time. So what I used to do was have client after client after client, or retreat after retreat, or event after event. And I didn't really give my body, especially my emotional body, time to, and I kept on staying on. So one of the first things to do is, if I, for example, run a weekend workshop and somebody says, I want to hire you for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll say, okay, but it's actually 6, because you're hiring for the recovery period afterwards. Because you're not just taking me away for 3 days, it's 6. Because those 3 days I've lost. Because if I work and try to do something else, I'm out. So it's having the psychology to understand that the time off to recover is as important as the time on. And I'm sure this must be the same in physical fitness, right?
Yeah.
That somehow around giving that time, if somebody's just working out constantly 7 days a week, that's going to hurt, right? Like sometimes less is more.
It doesn't bring result anyway.
Exactly. So if you want better results, you pace and you build in recovery. So think of it in that mindset. And I think people will go a long way. And a practical tip to discharge: nature, trees, green, water. So in a place like this, swimming, get into the salt water, and letting, and having the intention to let the earth take it. I mean, do you understand what I mean by that?
Yes.
It's like breathing it out, literally bringing it. That's what I would suggest.
Perfect. So I think it was very insightful meeting, insightful podcast. Thank you very much, Mo. Thank you very much, Mr. Christian. I hope it's not our last meeting, because I felt like very interesting topics we touch, and many of us, many of you guys also, I think, feel shy to think about even. But I think we are the one who can openly discuss. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for participation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and with you. Thank you.
Great.
Cool. Wow. So cool.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.